student in college. And I taught students with special needs for 20 years in the Brookline schools, which makes me 109. And later I became the principal of the Westwood and Northampton middle schools. I then went on to be the HR director in Lexington and the assistant superintendent for HR and long-range planning in Wellesley. And all that time, I still used all those assumptions and all those things my students taught me. And so I want to share some of those with you. So the first one. Wow. Slide. Can we make the full screen? Slide to a full screen. Okay, there we go. So the first thing, people don't get up in the morning
Can you help?
planning to mess up at work or school. They're trying to live their lives to be happy and a little less stressed. Mostly true. So here's an example. I'm the principal of the middle school, and Carmen, whose first language is not English, is in 7th grade. And she has a learning disability in whatever language it's in. She has a learning disability in that language. And I get a call with walkie-talkies then. I get a call on my walkie that says you have to come to the cafeteria. So I go to the cafeteria, and Carmen has come to 7th grade lunch, run across the cafeteria and started pounding on another girl that she has a running conversation with. And I thought, okay, so I sent one girl to the nurse. I'm walking with Carmen, and I said, can you walk with me? She said, okay. So we walked towards the office, and I said, can you talk to me? She said, no. Okay. So we get back to the office, and I asked her to sit down, and she's sitting down, and her knees going up and down, up and down, up and down. So I said, so this is a mistake, and I'm gonna have to call your mom. We're gonna talk about the mistake. And if you can you talk to me now? No. Okay. So I walk in and pick up the phone, and I call her mom, who answers the phone. Newsflash, I've not spoken to this woman
You know what to do.
in the 3 years I've been a
What do you
principal
want
there.
to do?
Okay. So I explained that Carmen has not acted in a way that either one of us would have found delight yesterday. And would she please come in so we could talk about that, because obviously she's very upset about something. So she says, yes, I'll be there in 20 minutes. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Great. After I pick myself up off the floor for the second time, thinking, that's a news flash. I think, okay, and I go back to Carmen and I say, so how are you doing? Glass of water, take a breath. Can you talk to me? Nope, knees going up and down, up and down, up and down. Okay. So mom shows up. Car pulls up in front of the school. When you're walking to the school, guidance is on the right, my office is on the left. So she gets onto the passenger side, which is a little strange, but okay. Walks into the school, time passes. No Carmen's mother. Okay. So I call over to guidance and say, if she's there, would you send her over here? Because I'd like to talk to her. Okay. She shows up and she walks to the doorway. Now Carmen's knee is going like crazy now. And she stands there with her other daughter, Stephanie. And I say, I'm so glad you were able to come. Carmen's having a really difficult day. And she says, I came to tell you that my boyfriend Hector and Stephanie and I are moving to Ohio, and we're leaving right now, and I don't care what you do with Carmen. And she turned around and left. And I was so struck that I didn't get the license plate on the car. I didn't do a thing. I just stood there with my mouth open like, are you kidding me? No, she wasn't kidding me. Walked out, got in the car, and drove away. People don't get up in the morning planning to mess up at school or work. They're trying to live their lives and be happy or a little less stressed. So I looked at Carmen and said, so you have a lot going on today. What adult in this school would you like to speak with? Because I was the one about to discipline you. I'm assuming it's not going to be me. That's fine. What adult would you like to speak with? I'm going to make that person available to you. Who do you want to talk to? She chose her guidance counselor. I got the guidance counselor. And I said, so here's my job. I'm going to get on the phone. I'm going to find a place for you to stay tonight. That's safe. So that you can come back tomorrow because you belong with us. You belong here. And so we're going to make sure that you are here. A big lesson for me. I couldn't imagine that my parents would walk into school and take my brother and leave me there and not care what happened to me. Big tune-up for me. So the story unfolds a little further. We find a place for Carmen to stay. And another parent in the school is on the foster care list, and she's willing to be the foster person for some time. So that works out. And I meet with Carmen every morning and every afternoon because I want her to be attached in some way. And so we're meeting and things go pretty well. Meet her every morning, meet her every afternoon. She learns how to read much better. She becomes just more settled in herself. Her family eventually came back to Massachusetts. The other daughter re-enrolled in the school. And by that time, Carmen had been accepted by a foster family, had moved to the next town, which I thought was a good result for her. So people don't get up in the morning to mess up at school and work, and you never know. You never know. So on a later note, Chris is now 42. I had him when he was in 1st through 7th grade. He has Apert syndrome. Apert syndrome is a metabolic challenge in which your body deposits calcium wherever it likes, not necessarily just where you think it's going to deposit it. So his elbows don't bend. His hands are webbed, and he has some facial abnormalities of excess with a lot of excess calcium there. So a ridge where his eyebrows would be. So he looks a little different. He's delightful. Now he's in 1st grade, and he and I are working a lot on balance because his elbows don't bend. When he falls, when he puts his hand up, it's a face plant every time. And so falling is not, he's very careful. So we worked a lot on fall and roll, fall and roll, fall and roll. So eventually I could walk down the middle of the gym with him and with all the mats out, and we walk along and I'm talking to him, I'd hip check him and he'd fall and roll, which is great because that's when you lose your balance, you're not planning to lose your balance, you just lose your balance. So that's fine. And I think, all right, we're ready now, 2nd grade, we're ready now to move on to what about the other obstacles in the world? Right? Can you make a judgment about crossing the street so he knows how fast things are coming? So he can make a judgment about when to cross and not just rely on the light. Okay. So I get on a playground ball, I put it on the desk, I'm gonna go get him. So I go to his 2nd grade class, I pick him up, we walk back, we hit the door, he looks at me, he looks at the ball, turns around and leaves. He leaves. It's like, there's a 2nd grader walking down the hall, and we're just gonna walk out the door and go home. So I run after him and I say, so what are you thinking? He said, I can't be in the room with that ball, it's gonna hit me. I said, okay. So you're pretty convinced. Hits me every time. I said, okay. Do you trust me? Can we come back and just sit? He said, yeah, but I can't be in the room. I said, perfect. So I got 2 chairs. I propped the doors open and we sat outside the room. And he said, what are we doing? I said, we're waiting to see what happens to the ball. So we sat there for a good long time and waited until he was sure the ball wasn't going anywhere. And then I said, can we move inside the room? I'm not going to change the ball. Just can we move inside? So we moved inside the room, and eventually I gave him pieces of tape. I would hold the ball and I would say, okay, I'm going to hold it here. Trust me to hold it here. I'm not going to drop it. Put the tape where you think the ball's going to end up. I can't reach that high. Okay, I'll reach that high. And I said, go back, sit down outside the room. I'm going to let the ball go and see what happens. We put the tape where the ball went. And we did this over and over and over and over until he finally understood that he could predict where the ball was going to go. Eventually, I could take him to the gym, toss the ball up, and say a number from 0 to 5, and he would catch it in the air, or on 1 bounce, 2 bounce, 3 bounce, 4 bounce. So for him, it's not often that a 2nd grader leaves the room on a teacher. That's a little unusual. And it was, people don't get up in the morning trying to mess up, they're trying to live their lives, and they're a little less stressed. Okay. The second one, people who hold the same expectations for behavior or performance have more productive conversation than those who don't. In other words, it works better for all in the same thing. So my examples for that. Keep going.
Yeah, it's not listening to me.
It's not listening to me.
Try this. That's. Note it down.
So I'm teaching in Brooklyn. I have a group of 1st graders. They're walked into the room, they're all sitting down. And one girl gets up and runs to the door, thinking, this isn't good. I've been here about a week. And new teacher, been here about a week. This kid is running for the door. There's a hallway, there are stairs, there's the front door of the school, and there's a really busy street. So I better get there before she gets there. So I run I make it there before her, and I have the presence of mind to say, so what are you thinking? And she said, oh, I have to close the door so we don't all fall out. Like, okay. So her expectation is that if everything's closed, I can pay attention. If everything isn't closed, I can't. Another one about people holding the same expectation. So Maddie has Down syndrome, same school, same. And at the beginning, he's in fourth grade, and so now I've got 5 or 6 fourth graders. At the beginning of each class, I have a little do now, right? And so they have a picture in front of them, and it will have a beanbag, a hula hoop, and a playground ball. And they'll have each of those 3 things. You know, the job is to make themselves look like the picture, right? Are they holding the ball? Are they standing in the hoop? And where are all those things? And perceptually, can you set it up so it looks like the picture? So we're going along, and I'm checking each one of them, and it takes not very long to check them because mostly they're right. The person before him is having a difficult time, and Maddie's getting a little frustrated. And he's getting a little more frustrated. So he's holding the ball over his head. Everything else is perfect. He puts the ball down, he drops his drawers, and he picks the ball back up. And I get to him and I look at him and I think, I've got a lot of choices here. I looked at him and said, do you look like the picture? And he went, no. Pulled up his pants and he put the ball back in the air. People who hold the same expectations tend to have better conversations. So back in Brooklyn, Andy's a twin. Andy's, I think, in 3rd grade. And Andy has a short fuse. And he is very bright, very volatile. And really, when he loses it, it's a thing to see. And I'm the vice principal of the school. Andy comes down, the wonderful guidance counselor is not in this day. And this is Andy's person. And so Andy walks into the office, he's sputtering and yelling and screaming and sputter, and this happened and that happened. And I don't like it. I'm going off. And the principal looks at me, smiles and says, your turn. Thank you. So I said, Andy, can you take my hand or shall I take you by the hand? And he's looking at me like, I can't talk to you now. So I took him by the hand and I started to walk to the guidance counselor's office because I figured at least it's a little isolated. And if he's yelling and screaming, it's not going to disturb so many people. So we're walking, and I finally stopped and I said, Andy, I said, what? I said, why are you yelling at me? I'm on your side. Oh, and he kept yelling. I'm like, okay, good. So we get to the door, we open it up, and I say, all right. So when you're with your guidance counselor, what happens? He said, well, we get here. I sit over there and he sits over here. I said, let's do that. So we did that. I said, now what happens? If I'm in a really bad mood, I take the pillow and I scream bad words into the pillow. What a great idea. Go ahead. So he's screaming bad words into the pillow, and I'm thinking, how long is this going to take? So he comes up for her and I said, how are we doing over there? He said, a little more. Great, go ahead. So he does a little more. And then he puts it down and I said, okay, so now what happens? And he said, well, now we talk about what those kids said that made me so upset. I said, go for it. Well, they said this and they said that. I said, now what happens? Well, now what happens is this guidance counselor will say to me, you understand that they're doing this to make you upset and you let them do it. And I said, you understand they're doing this to make you upset and you let them do it? He said, yeah, I know. Okay, what else happens? So he did the entire conversation. He said, now what happens when you go back to class? Because now he was much calmer. It's time to go back to class. I said, how do we do this? He said, here's how we do it. We walk in, we walk up to class, and you walk in first, and you walk up to the teacher and you say something to her. So everybody looks at the 2 of you. I walk in and I go back to my seat. I said, perfect, let's do exactly that. And so we did exactly that. People who hold the same expectations for behavior and performance tend to have better conversations. That guidance counselor did such a wonderful job of establishing a pattern with him that it was easy for somebody else to follow. It was great. Next one. Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better, is Maya Angelou. And what I add to that for my students is, and forgive yourself for what you didn't know before. Okay. So the first one is Todd. So this is the residential treatment center, and Todd is 5. It's a residential treatment center. He's 5. which means he's not going back to his home tonight. He's going to a residence. His parents are not going to be there. Nobody's going to tuck him in, right? That he knows. And so he's doing a great job. I'm videotaping him for this assessment. And he's working great, doing wonderfully well. And I am answering his questions, giving him a lot of praise. And so he's holding one position, a stability position. I want to see how long he can hold it. He's holding it, he's doing fine. And he looks at me and he says, absolutely earnestly, I can't know Tina and Nathan be from I was new. Now, I had exactly the same expression as you've got. I was 26 years old going, what? Yeah. And I said, one more time, I can't know Tina and Nathan be from I was new. Now, he's looking at me. I'm an adult in his world that he's just met, and he needs an answer. He's looking at me like, deliver, right? And I'm thinking, I have no idea what to say. So I took a breath and I looked at him and I said, of course. And he seemed to be satisfied with that. We finished up. I took him back to his teacher, who was a speech language pathologist, was the teacher for that room, thank goodness, because she's good at interpreting. And when we were there, I said, can I take a minute of your time? This is what he said. What's he trying to tell me? She said, oh, well, Tina and Nathan are two other kids in his class. They have the same learning profile. They get each other's jokes, right? And that's pretty important. And what he's telling you is he knows that he's going to be friends with these two kids, but they can't be friends yet because he just got here. I can't know Tina and Nathan be from I was new. And so that was his way of trying to explain that, all of that. And I thought, so of course was about as close as I would get. And he seemed to be okay with that. And I was glad. And it reminded me that you listen with your whole self. Because he needed me to say something. And my 26-year-old self figured out something to say. The other one, do the best you can until you know better. When you know better, do better. And forgive yourself for what you didn't know before. So this is Sophie. Sophie's in the Brookline schools. She has a degenerative neurological disorder. She's in a wheelchair. Her hands and arms, the muscle tone vacillates. So she has trouble pointing or, kind of doing things that are smooth actions. And my job is to help her not become too tired, but to maintain as much stability, postural stability as she can. So I'm working with a physical therapist and we're working on this. And getting to know her a little bit, what I realize is she loves music and she wants to be a ballerina. Like, okay. So we do our things every day and she's 11. Every year I reread my students' files to remind myself I reread everything to make sure that I know I'm remembering exactly what their concerns are, exactly what their challenges are, what's going to be different about this year than last year. And I read hers and I looked up her diagnosis, and 95% of the students that had her diagnosis don't live past puberty. And I thought, okay, so now you have that information. What do you want to do with that? So we start our sessions and I'm looking at her and I'm thinking, get a grip. So I went out and bought a little skirt that you could Velcro around your clothes. And I found a mirror. And for the last 5 minutes, which eventually became 15 minutes, of each of our sessions, I would sit behind her, low down so she couldn't see me in the mirror. I would hold her up, put the music on, and let her move her arms to the music so that she could think about being what she wanted to be. When you know better, do better, and forgive yourself for what you didn't know before. And that's Sophie, who then passed away 2 years later. Okay. Next one. More than one thing can be true at the same time. Don't you know that? All right. So, John, I was a middle school principal and I was in charge of the middle school in this K-8 school. I was the middle school person. I was the vice principal, mostly took care of the middle school. If you think of them as a large group of Labrador puppies, it works better. Because they bounce around and they growl at each other and they're trying to determine dominance and they're doing all of that. And if you think about them as Labrador puppies, it's a little easier. It's not quite so intimidating because they get tall quickly. So John is a tall Labrador puppy. And he shows up in the office. His science teacher has brought him to the office. So they show up in the office. Her hair is black, her face is red, she's sputtering, she can't make a sentence. The teacher, right? She has him by the middle of the shirt, right about his belly button. And she's bringing him in and she's like, he's looking like he wants to die and can't. And so I look at the two of them and I look at him and I say, sit down right there and stay right there. He said, thank you. And I look at her and I say, why don't you come on in here? And then I sent somebody to cover the class because she's just left all her kids unattended. So I sent somebody to cover the class. So she gets in and I have to go get her a drink of water because she can't, she's beside herself. So I'm thinking, okay, so what's this going to be? So she starts talking and it appears that she's given a test, 3 pages, and now they're going to go over the test in this class period. So she's paper clipped them all together. Kids come up one at a time. She's sitting there standing. She lays out the 3 pages. She gives them the paper clip because they're going to get the 3 pages back. They're going to go back to their seat. And if they have if they can explain to her why they chose the answer they chose that was wrong, and what's the correct answer, and why they would choose that answer now, which is like 2 paragraphs, then she will give them credit for that. But they have to go through that explanation. Okay. So she dropped a paper clip in her hair. And she lost it. She just lost her mind. And I'm sitting there thinking, laughing would be not a good thing. I gotta just, yep, that's terrible. Yep, that's the most awful thing I can think of. Okay. So I sit there and I say, do you trust me to talk to John? She says, yes. Okay. Why don't you take a walk, get another drink of water, take a little stroll around the building, and then go back to your class when you're ready. Okay, good. So I stand up and I just had my moment of, he did what? So, and I'm looking at him thinking, think Labrador puppy. Okay, got it. So he comes in and sits down and I say, can you help me understand this? Because what I've come to understand is life is a movie. Everybody's life is a movie. And any interaction you have with them is like a still picture of this whole movie. And so do you understand what's going on in this still picture? Not unless you get a sense of what's going on in the movie. So I said, what happened here? He said, oh, it was bad. He said, okay, so tell me. He said, well, I stood up there and I put the 3 pages down and she gave me the paper clip to hold. And I looked at, she was going over page 1 and I looked at page 1. I didn't do that well on page 1. I didn't do well on this test. And I'm looking at page 1 and I can barely look at it because I just did really bad. And then I go to the second page, when it's worse on the second page, I can't look at that one. And because I can't look at that one, I'm looking around for something else to look at. And I look down and, she doesn't have a lot of hair. Yes, that's true. And I realized that if I held the paper clip just a certain way, I could drop it down there and it wouldn't touch any hair and it would bounce right off her scalp. I said, uh-huh. And he looked at me and he said, I just couldn't help myself. I said, clearly. Clearly you couldn't help yourself. And I said, okay, so we have this conversation to have now because in a little while, I'm going to dial up your dad, who parenthetically happens to be a Greek Orthodox minister. And you're going to explain to him what you did and then what you're going to do about it. So let's have this conversation about what happened and what you think it means to her and how you might make this better. Because if you make a mistake with something, you have to then apologize and figure out how you're going to make that better. So we had that conversation. Yeah, more than one thing can be true at the same time. He made a huge mistake and he was trying so hard to figure out what to do with his embarrassment. He could not figure out what to do, being so embarrassed that he had done so badly that he just couldn't look at the paper. Okay. Bob and William. So Bob is now a civil rights attorney. He also has cerebral palsy. And he has, he uses Lofgren crutches, which are the ones that have the little clips at the arms. And the little bars, and so he uses those crutches, he's used them all the time. So he was in high school, and he and I worked together for a couple of years. And I said to him, so you chose a PE class, I'll support you in your PE class, what did you choose? He said, weight training. I'm like, really? Okay. Because we had talked a lot about the fact that when you are using your arms for your legs, then your arms get pretty strong. So for him, part of the challenge was not to bulk up his top half so much that it made balance difficult because he was a little top heavy. So we would work on how we're going to balance that out, how we're going to make sure that this all works for you. So I met him in his weight training class, and I'm looking around, and it's like half the football team. Like, great. And he said, can you help me stretch? I said, nope. I will place a chair and hold it for you. I'll put my foot here so you can push against it, right? But as a woman, I'm not going to move your body in front of all these high school boys. That's not what's going to happen. So let's figure out how you can do this yourself. So he did it himself. And it's time to now go do the machines. And so I said, what would you like to do first? He said, so I'd really like to do the hang and then the pull-ups. So there's this bar that you can hang on. And because he spends so much of his time kind of collapsed on himself, hanging is just such a relief because his spine gets to stretch out. It's just pleasant. So he crutches over there. Now, where he's going to hang is opposite. It's a universal machine, so it's opposite the bench press. So there's a kid on the bench press who's probably 180, and he's benching as much as he can possibly do. And he's working really hard. And so Bob is hanging on the other side. And I said, so Bob, how many chin-ups do you want to do? He said, I know 20. And I could hear the kid going, yeah, right. I'm like, so I'm counting 1, 2, 10, 11, 12, 15, 16, 17. And the kid sits up, turns around, and I say, surprising, isn't it? He goes, how's he do that? I said, he's wicked strong. And so it was an interesting moment of more than one thing could be true at the same time. He looks tremendously disabled when he's standing in front of you. And when he's on that pull-up bar, you can't beat him. 25, 30, 31, 32, 33, he just kept going. Because he uses his arms as his legs all day, every day. And so they're pretty strong. Okay, last one. You never know the background or the life experience of the person to whom you're speaking. You really never know to whom you're speaking. You don't know their history. You have no idea. You have no idea who they are. And so this is Ramin. Ramin is in the Brookline schools. He's come from Cambodia. It's in the 80s. Cambodia is having a little strife. But like most people, you're not necessarily aware of what life is like in Cambodia right now. And so I wasn't aware of what life was like in Cambodia for him, and neither was anybody else. In the Brookline public schools at that time, there were 64 countries of national origin and 37 different languages. They had bilingual programs in Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Russian, Spanish, and Hebrew, which means that there were enough of those kids to have a special teacher to have them clustered in one school. And so here's Ramin. And Ramin's been here 6 months, 8 months, and he's in 3rd grade. He has a great 3rd grade teacher who was working with him, and I'm walking in to pick up my student, and I'm standing patiently because my student's in the middle of doing something, so I'm going to wait for him to finish. And I hear her say to Ramin, you're doing such a good job. You haven't been here very long. Your English is really coming along so well. You work hard, and you really are thoughtful, and I'm so glad you're here. And he said, oh, I'm really glad to be here too. I didn't want to die. And I looked at this teacher and I thought, between the two of us, we have like 50 years on the planet. He's had more life in his however many years you are in fourth grade, then third grade, then we've had in all the 50 years we've been here. So you never, ever, ever know to whom you're speaking. So these assumptions. Got the last, yep, put the last one up. Is that the last one?
No, there is one more.
So here they are. People don't get up in the morning to mess up at work or school. They're trying to live their lives and be happy or a little less stressed. That's one. People hold the same expectations. People who hold the same expectations for behavior performance have more productive conversations than those who don't. So kind of we're all on the same page of books, by the way. Do the best you can until you know better. When you know better, do better. And forgive yourself for what you didn't know before. More than one thing can be true at the same time. And you never ever know the life experience or background of the person to whom you're speaking. And so those are the things that my students taught me. And those are the things that I've taken with me for the rest of my life. And I hope I help you think about some of your assumptions. Right? And I'm going to do a Mr. Rogers ending here, because I like Fred Rogers. So I want you to think about what assumption you have in your life. Think about one assumption you have in your life and the person or people that cause you to hold that assumption. And I'm going to mark the time for us. If you would think about that person there, that assumption. 10 seconds here. It's going to take me 15 seconds to find that timer. There we go. Okay, think about that person. Here we go. And thank you. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for every interaction you have with a child. Thank you very much. You.